Hello, everyone. My name is Mark Shoemate, and I am an EMT firefighter for our great county. Today, I want to give you some information about a particular hazard in our county and how we are proposing to address that risk. The risk that we all face as residents is wildland fires. I know many of you remember the Briceville fire, which happened on a windy day in March approximately 5 years ago. A man was illegally burning old paperback books and clutter in his yard. The wind picked up, igniting a wildfire that spread quickly, initially to 5 acres, but then to 700, destroying 2 homes and damaging 8 others. In addition, this fire took almost a week to contain, using the fire and emergency resources of Nassau and neighboring counties, state forest workers, and investigators from the State Office of Agricultural Law Enforcement. During this week, more than 200 people were evacuated from their homes and lived in shelters provided by the county and local churches. This is a fire risk that we want to reduce and an event that we do not want to repeat in our community. Our fire department responds to a high number of wildland fires each year that require a great number of resources. These fires also cause a great amount of property damage. Our goal in implementing in our community risk reduction plan is to mitigate the risk associated with wildland fires by empowering residents and government to act through education, enforcement, and emergency response. By analyzing demographic data, we understand that 3/4 of our community is rural, which puts these areas at high risk for wildland fires. By analyzing department data, we understand that over the last several years, fire calls for wildland fires are approximately 40% of all of our fire calls. We also understand wildland fire calls are approximately 3 times more expensive to suppress. So based on the data analyzed, wildland fire risk is likely and impacts on resources, environment, property, and people is moderate to major. Therefore, wildland fire is characterized as a high risk, which means it shouldn't be prioritized in our community's risk reduction plan. So, what are the strategies and tactics that we want to use to reduce wildland fire risk in our community? We started by examining and evaluating our current strategies and tactics and their effectiveness in our community. Then we researched what other communities who were similar to ours were doing to mitigate wildland fire risks. Then, after evaluating what we were currently doing and how we could do it to add or to improve to it, we chose the strategies that had been the most successful for our communities and others like it. We determined that education, enforcement, and emergency response strategies were the most successful in the past, and the tactics for these strategies could be improved. We have 2 education mitigation tactics that we want to implement. The first one is social media posts made on many community sites and web pages that remind residents about the environmental conditions specific to fire danger today if burning is allowed by residents at this time. The second education tactic is to schedule Smokey the Bear appearances and talks in elementary schools and at least 5 additional community events around the county to inform residents about fire prevention and the dangers of wildfires in our county. In addition, we also have 2 enforcement mitigation tactics that we want to implement. The first one is to publicize in various digital and print media community burn regulations and then enforce these regulations. The enforcing would be multi-agency tasks that should include the Sheriff's Office and the State Forest Service. The second enforcement tactic we want to enforce is hazardous fuel guidelines that encourage and require owners to mow, burn, and cut or reduce underbrush on large tracts of private land. Again, this is a multi-agency task that should be led by the State Forestry Service. Lastly, we have 2 emergency response mitigation tactics that we want to implement. The first one is to ensure that multi-agency responses is ready to manage and fight wildland fires. This readiness includes multi-agency training for personnel related to specialized equipment in situations. It also includes having the appropriate equipment or agreements in place to get the necessary equipment. The multi-agencies include neighboring fire departments and the State Forestry Service. The second tactic relates to evacuation planning for residents. This tactic is also multi-agency / department and will be led by the county's emergency management department. You may be saying to yourself, this sounds great, but how are we going to pay for this? The education strategy and tactics funding requirements would be small and could be absorbed in the current prevention budget allocations. However, the enforcement strategy and emergency response tactics funding requirement would be sizable, approximately 6 figures. So to pay for these costs, we were proposing applying for federal and state grants that are available annually related to wildland fire risk. As a result of this public service announcement, we are asking you for your support, our plan, by helping us communicate the need for wildland fire prevention and mitigation. Remember, our neighbors in Briceville, we don't want to live through the tragedy again. Thank you for listening and being a partner in this risk reduction for our community.